It's Alan Kearns, and glad to have you on our CareerClass series with HRPAO Ontario, and glad to be a part of this formal partnership we have with the HR Association of Ontario, providing career advice to HR professionals and guiding you through this conversation. And looking forward to our conversation today, as we're calling it CareerClass 101, and launching your HR career and career success for the long haul. And that's really what we're going to be talking about, the basic principles around career management and around elements today. So it's going to be a little bit like this idea. It's a little bit like, you're all in this sector, and for many, many years I thought I knew how to fish, and then I actually went on a fishing, fly-in fishing event as part of a board I'm on, and what I learned was I really didn't know how to fish as well as I thought. And actually one of our guides noticed some of the ways I was fishing and gave me some advice, and lo and behold, I went from being what I would call a mediocre fisherman to being a pretty good fisherman and looking for opportunity. And so that's really what I want to talk about today, about sort of fine-tuning. You've got some of the principles about maybe fine-tuning some of these things, and that you really can teach people to fish. You really can. And that's the goal, is to teach you how to be more effective at this. A couple of quick things for participating today. One of the things that I'm a big advocate for in webinars is that it's a conversation, not a monologue. And so I'm going to encourage you to enter that conversation today in a couple of different ways. Number one, how many of you, put up your hands, are on Twitter or using Twitter as a tool, as a personal branding tool, as a connection tool? Put up your hands, those of you that are currently using Twitter. All right, excellent. So what I want to encourage you today is to use Twitter to share ideas or share comments or share thoughts that come out of today's webinar. And it's good for a whole bunch of reasons. One, it kind of helps you to stay in that frame of mind. Two, it shares. We're in the sharing economy, and one of the ways you can help, and one of the principles around career management is to share, to be a good sharer. It's something we learned in if you had brothers or sisters. I didn't, but we did learn it. I did learn it when I went to kindergarten and with friends. And so how do you do that? Well, so you can hash CareerJoy or hash CareerClass or hash HRPA as well. We'll also have an opportunity to connect with me on LinkedIn. How many of you are on LinkedIn, are using LinkedIn fairly actively? Put up your hands. Actually, LinkedIn has the highest penetration in the world in Canada. And what I encourage you to do is, you've seen my my LinkedIn profile here, or my links, so feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I've given you my email address, alan@careerjoy.com, so you can use that when I ask you how you want to connect with me. And then you can also follow me on Twitter as well at CareerJoy. So a little bit about my background. I'm the founder and head coach of CareerJoy, and we're really, our premise when I started the company, we're 10 years old, and we're just about to open our 11th office. And really our premise is to put the human back in human resources, to humanize work, to bring this idea that you are not talent, you are not resources, you are not capital, that you and I are human beings, really, in a sense, looking to go to work, looking to do good and meaningful work. And how do we go about doing that? So that's really the premise of our company. We work with individuals across the country. We also work with a number of corporate clients that engage us for outplacement, leadership development. And one of the things I'm really proud about is we take a very hands-on, boutique, high-touch experience versus putting you through the traditional kind of what I call career development 1.0, right? So, and my own background actually in this area is that I actually was trained as an optician and then made a career transition myself. So I've been through this whole journey of, what is it I want to do and where do I want to go? And actually my goal today is for you to give you sort of a better, worse, and for you to come out of this with a more clearer picture of yourself, a more clearer picture of what's going on in the economy, a more clearer picture about how to brand yourself and do that more effectively. It's actually what I'm trained to do. But I actually have a confession. I was a headhunter, an executive recruiter for a number of years, and the reason I started CareerJoy is I really felt that many people were struggling with how to manage their career and career literacy issues, and so this is where CareerJoy came in, to sort of go upstream and downstream of where recruiters play, and to provide this unbiased, independent, objective view. And so I come at this both from having made a career transition myself and having to market myself and having to launch a new career and start something from scratch like many of you are, and also from being in the business of HR and seeing how companies work and how recruiters actually work and how people actually get hired and what the actual sort of, I was opportunity to have a backstage pass. So that's what I want to share with you, sort of a backstage pass around this whole topic. So people often ask me, what do I mean by career joy? I think this is what you are looking for, and it's what I'm looking for, and it's what people, as you launch in your career as an HR professional, what are people looking for? I think most people are looking for a career, not a job. And it's this ongoing journey, an ongoing trajectory of your life, of managing a profession or undertaking. And I also think that joy means not necessarily happy, but in a sense of being valued or appreciated and taking great pleasure. It's interesting, Alice Munro, who we all know last week, or this week, I guess, or last week, became a Nobel laureate. First Canadian, by the way. We did have a Canadian a person who was born in Canada but wasn't Canadian win a Nobel Prize for literature before, but the first actually true Canadian. And one of the things I loved about what it was said about her is that that she loved to write, and that was really what drove her. And so to me, it gave her great pleasure and great delight to do that. And we appreciated that in different ways. So this is really what I want to talk about. So first of all, I want to get you to take a minute to introduce yourself. And how do I want to do this? If you could go in the question box here and just introduce your name and location. Why did you choose HR as a profession? And your biggest challenge now is. So just take a minute to introduce your name and location. Why did you choose HR as a profession? And your biggest challenge now is. Let me share that. So again, lots of, we have people here from Queens, from Toronto, from Windsor, Toronto, great, Ottawa, Toronto, we're seeing how far we can go across. Excellent. So why did you choose, okay, so just to ask that question, why did you choose HR as a profession? So we're getting people to answer that. So Stephanie says, I chose HR as a profession because I love the dynamic of working with others and helping find the best people for the best jobs. Excellent. That's great. That's Stephanie. Megan, I chose HR because I enjoy training and development and working with people. Okay. Stephen, HR was an interesting line of work that covers all business sectors. Okay. Linda in Ottawa. So HR flowed from my work as a psychologist, and the biggest challenge is to launch a new career after 31 years in the field. So again, probably explaining experience of what many people are. Noelle talks about this whole concept of biggest job is finding a full-time HR job. Brianne in Toronto. It was part of my first job that I did best and enjoyed the most. Okay, excellent. Julie in Ottawa says, it chose me. That's interesting. I won't camp on that idea. It chose me deciding now how I want to contribute in HR. How many of you, if you're honest about it, put up your hands, would say that HR chose you? It wasn't necessarily something that you were intentional about, but you kind of stumbled into it. How many of you would say that it's something that you stumbled into? It wasn't like you knew all, right from the get-go that HR was your track. Yeah, so about a third of you stumbled into it. It's interesting, John Stanton, the founder of the Running Room, talks literally about stumbling into running as a career and building the Running Room as a result. Okay. Another person here, Lisa talks about, I chose HR because I love connecting with people and connecting with their needs. Yeah, it's very true. Another person here, Lisa talks about the idea of making a transition from marketing to the people side of business, which is really what we're talking about, right? The people side of business. This is interesting too, that HR is about bringing out best of people's potential. Excellent. Okay. So what are some of the biggest challenges you all have? Okay, so some of the biggest challenges is getting that first opportunity. Biggest challenge is finding a job coming out of university. Absolutely. Another big challenge is evaluating one's own strengths and emphasizing the right niche. Lisa talks about the biggest challenge to begin my career path when I've been in the restaurant industry throughout. So this whole idea of repositioning yourself and around that, absolutely. Stephen talks about this. The biggest challenge is gaining experience in the field of HR as a new entrant. Okay, Sarah talks about the biggest challenge now is obtaining a job after college, university, with no actual work experience, only education. Okay, great. All right, so this is great, excellent. So thank you for sharing that. And as we go through our discussion today, lots of great conversations. I encourage you to ask questions, make comments in this as we enter in this conversation today. So a little bit is like this. You know, many of you are saying, you know what, I see the opportunity, I see the goal, I see where I want to be. You're here today because most of you have a very clear picture that you want to be in this line of field. That's why most of you are fairly clear. And one of the things I've observed about HR professionals is they tend to be more thoughtful in that choice. So even if you stumble into it, just the very nature of the job requires a certain level of self-awareness and self-commitment. And so to me, you know, how does one do this? Well, what is the way that you go about doing this? So what I want to talk to you about is this whole concept of what Terry O'Reilly calls literacy. How many of you have listened to or seen his program on TV or heard him speak? Put up your hands, those of you that have heard or seen him speak. Yeah. And one of the things I was really struck about was that his role in Canada is to really bring literacy to you as consumers. Now, why is that? Because the higher your literacy rate, the better decisions you're going to make as a consumer, and the more empowered you're going to be. So here's premise number one about launching your career. If you only remember one thing, this is the one thing I hope you could take away from our discussion today, that managing your career is about literacy. You can be well educated and have an HR certification, BCHRP, you know, have a good degree, have a good background. That's one element, but that's not necessarily literacy. That's knowledge, right? And so premise number one about leading and managing your career is your career success and your career literacy are absolutely interrelated. What do I mean by that? The more knowledge you have, and it's this concept of building blocks, that your education is something you started with. That's your education. That's the tool, the platform, right? But all of the success, all of the ways that you're going to be successful in managing an ongoing way in your career is going to be built upon that. And that's just the foundation, and it's really about building upon that. Now, why does literacy matter? Why does career literacy matter? Well, it matters for a few different reasons, and this will help you maybe understand about maybe some of your frustrations about launching into your career. Number one, there is what I call not necessarily economic recession, it's an economic recession. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is there's a tremendous amount of economic change. So you look at a company like RIM who's thriving and then all of a sudden struggles, right? So you're seeing these markets. You can see the markets around the debt crisis we're dealing with right now. Very, very turbulent. So that's a change. That's not what we normally saw, let's say, in the previous 20 years of the economy, where the economy kind of grew at a very steady rate. Interesting stat. The economy is growing at 100% less than it was in the last 10 years. The average growth rate in our economy was about 3% in the last 20 years. It's right now growing in North America at a 1.5% rate. What does this mean? It means a much tighter economy. It still means, by the way, there's 1.5% opportunity down at $1.3 trillion. So it's about $200 million, $2 billion more a year of opportunities out there. So there's a continuing amount of opportunities, but not growing at the same rate. Another change, public sector. So again, in the past, public sectors were growing across the world. There were lots of growth, and now you see in North America, in different parts of this world, where public sectors now are shrinking or are flattening out or changing. And public sector and different organizations and municipals and hospitals and public sector are not growing at the same rate, and they're not offering necessarily the same employment guarantees. Right? So that's a change. Here's another change around the world of work and a theme around this area. How many people do you think are graduating from these two countries in the next year? Put your answer in the question box. How many people do you think are going to be graduating from universities? So these are not people going to work in factories, but in universities. What do you think the number is that are amount of people that are going to be graduating from Okay, just throw it in your question box here. So we're getting 1 million, 5 million, some other answers. 30 plus million, yeah. Alexander, you are pretty close to that. That basically the entire population of Canada is going to be graduating out of universities. And what does this mean? Well, it means for the first time ever, we really have a truly globalized workforce, that companies are now making decisions of where to grow differently than they ever had before. And again, we're not talking about emerging economies. China and India are emerged economies, and that level of professionalism, global companies are rethinking where they evolve, where they invest, what this looks for. So principle here you need to be thinking about as a career management side is what kind of global experience can you get as an HR professional? It's very interesting. My daughter currently is in a gap year, and she's in Australia. And then she's there for 8 months and before she starts university. And then she's going to China for 4 months. And then she's going to be starting at UBC next September. And I really encourage that. Why? Because she needs to understand what it means to live as a global citizen, to understand that we're no longer Canadians, although we are Canadian, but we're living in a global world. And one of the things you want to be, strongly encourage you in your career opportunities is, can you find global opportunities? Can you find, when you're working in an HR project, can you get involved in a global team? Can you, because that's going to really give you a huge advantage. Another trend that's changing the world of work, and it's impacting all the dimensions, is technology and 24/7 nature of work. The idea that you can work anywhere, anytime. The idea that this concept of work-life balance, of showing up and doing things, is changing. So that's a real change. What's another trend? How many of you are currently working or have been on a contract opportunity? Put up your hands. Those of you that are currently working in a contract or have worked in a contract opportunity. Okay, so about 30% of you. These three employers, by the way, are the biggest employers in the country, and by the way, in the world now. What does this mean? Well, it means this concept of what I call the entertainment model, that we're moving more from what I work for an organization for 10, 15, 30 years, concept of the full-time opportunity, that working like an entertainer does, like an actor does, where you're working from project to project. And now, it's not to say you won't be in long-term projects and opportunities, but again, what is it like for you? What does that mean for you, how you manage your career? What does that mean for your expectations about getting a quote-quote full-time job? Any more than what does it mean for an actor to get a quote-quote full-time acting gig, right? And you need to think like an actor. You need to think like an independent person. You need to think about your own brand, and I'm going to be sharing a bit about that. But this is another change. And also you need to be thinking about your literacy. How do you work with agencies? How do you manage yourself? How do you work with recruiters within those models? Again, not everyone knows how to do that so well. How do you get them to be your advocate? How do you get them to give you better gigs than they might give a peer? Because why? They have a heavy role to play now in opportunities and in gate openings. So that's a real change. Another change is the multi-generational workforce. How many of you are told that the baby boomers are going to be retiring? There's going to be all kinds of opportunities open up for you now that you're joining the workforce. Put up your hands, those of you that were told that as the babies are leaving, man, you got it made. So here's why you don't. Because if you look in 2009, 55% of the workforce was planning on retiring at the age of 66. And in 2012, it was dropped by 100%. So 27% were thinking of retiring at 66. Now, what does this mean? Why are they not retiring? Well, number one, 25% because they enjoy their work. Number two, 21% because they want to stay mentally active. And then the rest are economic. So what does this mean? It means that people are staying in the world of work longer, and that, therefore it's impacting sort of the shift or the opportunities that are out there. And one of the things you want to be thinking about, what is it like for you to work within a multi-generational workforce? What is it like for you to work with somebody that's 20-something, somebody that's a Gen X, somebody that's a boomer, somebody that's a millennial, somebody that's a mature employee? And by the way, mature employees, if you're in a hiring employee, can be incredibly good value, can bring tremendous value to the opportunity. And again, as an HR professional, as a person within the practice of HR, what is it like to deal with different levels? You know, we're dealing with one of our corporate clients is public sector, and that's one of the managers talking about. How do I manage somebody in my team that's 58 or 64, and how do I manage somebody that's 22, and there are different ways that they think and work. So again, as a literacy issue, what is that like for you? Here's another reality. Choices, the amount of choices. There's tremendous amount of choices out there for sauces, and there is tremendous amount of choices for you. And this is this concept of how do you choose something? How do you stand out in a world like this? This is this concept of personal branding. Again, when I grew up, there were two kinds of mustards. There was the hot mustard in our fridge and regular French's mustard. The world we live in now, there is a mustard for everyone. So what does this mean to you? Is how do you go about building a brand so that you stand out, that you find a specific market, that you have a specific niche? One of the biggest dangers you can have is just to call yourself an HR professional. I'll give you an example of that. I was looking at somebody's LinkedIn profile, and what she said is she's a fundraising expert who is a data geek. Let me say that again. I'm a fundraising expert who is a data geek. What does that mean? It means somebody that really understands their niche within the market. And again, it's no longer good to be, quote, quote, a generalist. You need to think about what is your niche, and you need to be thinking about branding and marketing, some of the principles around that, and how you do that. So what is this doing? So lest you think I'm trying to be negative here, I'm not. What it means is, it's interesting. I was listening to Arlene Dickinson from Dragon's Den. And how many of you watch the Dragon's Den show? Put up your hands, those of you that are sort of followers of Dragon's Den. Okay. So what she said, I listened to her talk about being an entrepreneur on Monday, actually. And what she said is what entrepreneurs do, the best entrepreneurs that she sees, see the world as it actually is. Let me say that again. The best entrepreneurs see the world as it actually is, not as they want it to be or as it was. So why am I sharing this? Because this is the world that you and I are a part of. And for the most part, it's an amazing world. It's an amazing opportunity. There's amazing opportunities out here. So lest we think that this is an excuse, this is just context. Right? This is just context. It's not to be an excuse. You're not to come to me and say, I can't get a job because of. Right? This is just context. And if you understand context, then you can navigate and you can address and strategize in the reality of the situation versus what you want it to be or what it was or what your parents had. Right? So what is some of the context around where the future of HR and how is this impacting the future of HR and the future of your profession? So according to KPMG, the number one literacy issue, one of the number one benefit that HR is going to be need to be providing is managing costs. It's managing the element of that. The second thing is their collaboration with senior management on people strategy. Third area is implementing coaching and career development programs. The fourth area, as we talked about, this idea of, which is 29%. The fourth area is retaining key talent globally. Then it's achieving operational excellence. Then it's scoring key talent. So it's interesting how most of those things are around strategy, around thinking of HR more of a strategist than in moving resumes around. Right? See, the world was before moving resumes, getting interviews, things like that. If you're going to have a high-value career, you're going to need to think like an HR strategist and an HR catalyst versus the previous generation in some ways. So it's grown, it's matured. It's interesting here about making use of social media. That's a high need. Preparing for the changing workforce is a higher need. So these are interesting things to think about. Here's another interesting thing on this survey. 81% of respondents see that talent management is a key advantage. Only 15% see HR as able to provide insightful and predictive advice. Just 17% are able to see that HR is providing value to the business. And this is interesting. Only 28% of leaders have been in the companies for 10 plus years. So again, changing down. A 300% increase in international experience. An increase from 27 to 42% in female leadership. And this is interesting, 40% of top HR roles were hired outside the company. So what does this mean? It means your profession is changing. The most problematic stat I see there is the 15 and 17%. And again, I think it's also the opportunity you have, by the way, that as a HR professional entering into this world, Are you starting to see the value you provide versus being a tactician, right? There's the need and there's the opportunity. So the question I have for you is how do you be smart instead of being afraid of these changes? Again, seeing the world as it is, how do you move from being afraid of that to being smart about it? And what does that look like? So let's shift to some of the things, the myths around this. Well, number one is you should know how to do this. You should instinctively know how to brand yourself, how to navigate in this dynamic environment. How many of you instinctively think you should know how to scuba dive? Right? You know that you go to a scuba diving literacy program, right, and learn how to scuba dive. Another myth around this is there's a magic bullet. How many of you are, put up your hands, those of you who have done a Myers-Briggs or what color are you kind of test yeah, huge percentage of you, right? Guess what? You are not a color. You are not a four-letter acronym. You are far more interesting and far more complex than that. And this is the whole next gen of assessment tools that we use and that are much more dynamic and much more sophisticated than kind of what I call the old model. Another myth around this is that family and friends will have the answer. You know, many of you are probably being influenced by family and friends, what you should and shouldn't do and how you should job hunt, etc. And again, I'm not saying that they're not well-meaning, but what I'm suggesting is be careful where you get your advice from. Be careful what you listen to. Be careful who you seek out for support. Good to get support, but also be careful where you get advice. Another myth around this, you should be able to do this by yourself. I often see that with people who think, well, I should be able to do it. Or this, even worse, you can discover the answer on Google. And again, Google is great for information, but is not great for wisdom. And great for information, not so good for wisdom. So be careful of that, about making decisions or making elements around that. Another myth around this, educational health, if I just do a master's, if I just do an MBA. Again, I'm not saying you shouldn't do those things. What I'm suggesting is education standalone will not necessarily help you because there's never been more well-educated people. There's never been more supply of HR professionals, young grads, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to think about education as a tool, but not as the answer. Right? So the other myth I would say is that some people are lucky. Put up your hands, those of you that would say you're lucky. That by nature, you're lucky. There's a great book called The Luck Factor by Dr. Richard Wiseman. And he points out that really it's statistical, that luck is not about luck. So if you're having, quote, quote, bad luck with your job search, so here's what lucky people do, quote, quote. They're skilled at noticing, acting upon chance opportunities. They do this in various ways, including networking, adopting a relaxed attitude, being open. Do you have a relaxed attitude? Are you open? Are you checking out new opportunities? You know, your best decision-making tool is your gut. So are you paying attention to your gut? Second principle. Third principle is lucky people are looking for the good. So you know, the very beginning I talked about all these changes, and part of you thinking, oh boy, we're really going to be challenged. It's going to be terrible. I'm, the victim kind of thing. And again, lucky people see the opportunities and miss that. And then the other thing lucky people do is they're very good at dealing with stress and all the stress around this. So if you look at this, where do you think your strongest luck principle is playing for you? And where, if you're honest with yourself, is the place that you need to work on in your luck mindset? So maybe share that. Where do you think your strongest luck principle is working for you? And maybe where is you feel like, you know what, I'm struggling with that issue if I'm honest with myself in my job search. Share that in the question box there. So how are you dealing with change? What does that look like? And how do you manage that? So to me, what's really important in this principle of launching your career is the who. And what do I mean by that? Well, this concept of personal branding, personal branding, our industry has made this big, personal branding, it's a big new revolutionary thing. Guess what? Personal branding has been around since the beginning of time. The multiple Caesars used personal branding to influence, shape, get opportunity, and think about things. And what's interesting is, to give an example of this, let's talk about a couple of brands that you want to be thinking about. And I thought about this idea of where things are at and why people may struggle at times, and it struck me very obviously one day. So let me share this little model that I think is going to be fundamental. I'm going to talk about three main ideas today. One is literacy. Two is branding. the second piece here that I think is fundamental. So let's talk about the identity of Starbucks. Who is Starbucks from your perspective? So just share. Who do you, when you think of Starbucks, Starbucks is ... Share that with me. What does Starbucks do for you as a consumer? Starbucks is, and share that in the question box there. Starbucks is quality coffee, good coffee, yeah. Expensive, yeah. Third place, absolutely. My lifeblood as a student, love that, Alex, that chic atmosphere. You could use that both metaphorically and true. Everywhere, overrated, expensive, okay. Personalized service, okay. Who is Tim Hortons? Who is Tim Hortons? Who is Tim Hortons? Cheap, Canadian, fast, quick and cheap, yep. Starbucks is high-end, yep. Canadian icon, absolutely. Everyday man, totally good neighbor, quick, consistent, affordable, absolutely. All right. Who is Don Cherry? Who's Don Cherry? So Don Cherry is Mr. Hockey, annoying, a couple things annoying. Canadian villain, I like that. Guy with the crazy suits, yeah, face of Canadian hockey, okay. Who is Ron McLean? Who is Ron McLean? Ron McLean is sidekick, no clue, sidekick, sports commentary, yeah, sidekick, absolutely. Good Canadian lad, absolutely. Sort of the nice guy, absolutely. Kind of a nice, consistent, even-keeled, dresses fairly conservative, the rational, good questions, right? Makes Jerry Tolliver. It's a good example of yin and yang, by the way. Okay. And there's this company you can order thousands of items and it's delivered to your doorstep. Who is that? Thousands of items and they'll deliver to your doorstep. Which brand is that? You can order thousands of items and they'll deliver. You're correct. It's Amazon. Actually, it was this little company called Eaton's. See that picture there? It's from 1913. They had this amazing technology. You could share it with your friends and family. You could like the page. You could favorite the items. And you could order items. They would magically appear at your doorstep. That was 100 years ago. 100 years ago. They had this amazing technology, amazing thing. So here's an example of brands, right? And 4 brands that are relevant and strong, and it's instantaneous, your ability to identify them and what they can do for you. And an example of a Canadian iconic brand that is no longer around, which was the Amazon, by the way, of our time. Really, and why is it not today? And it's really this principle. So what do brands do, and what can you do? And how can you, again, think about managing your career. Think about this issue. Knowing who you are clearly, knowing who and where your market is specifically, knowing how to market yourself confidently and consistently, and evolving and adapting on a continual basis. So let's talk about those 4 principles as it relates to you. Gallup did a strengths finders poll. What percentage of people knew their strengths precisely? What do you think the percentage of people that knew their strengths precisely was? Any ideas? 1.2 million people, 60 countries, 99 companies. Yeah. Veronica guessed it. It's just slightly below 20%, 17%. AKA 83% of professionals did not have a clear and precise sense of their strengths. So number 1, how well do you know your strengths? Again, like that fundraiser who says, I'm a fundraiser who is a data geek. That's an example of that, right? And 17% was actually a specific number. Do you know who and where your market is specifically? So are Starbucks and Tim Hortons competitors? Are they competitors? What do you think? Do you think they're competitors? Are BMW and Honda competitors? Absolutely not. They are not competitors. They are in the same category, but they're actually not competing for the same client. So what about you? Are you a big corporate person? Are you a consulting type personality? Are you a small company person? Like, what about you? Where is your market that suits who you are? Are you a premium? Are you small? What does that look like? When do most people market themselves? When do most people market themselves? When you think about this concept of marketing, when do most people do that? Most people market themselves when? When they're looking for a job. Right. When does Tim Hortons market itself? When does Tim Hortons market itself? Every day. Absolutely, Sharon. What's interesting is this is what's very powerful about today is I call this the Tim Hortons principle. That Tim Hortons is, 1, encouraging you to come to them every day, and number 2 is telling their story in new and engaging ways all the time. Why are they doing that? Why is Tim Hortons constantly telling their story every day. We know who they are. We know what they do. We understand their brand. Why are they doing that? Why are they wasting all that money? Well, have you been along Queen Street recently? Have you looked at all the choices of coffee stores there are? And I call it the roll at the rim principle. Roll at the rim is something they do every single year to continually not only captivate their audience, but keep their audience. So let me ask you, when do you market yourself? This is why blogging, LinkedIn, Twitter, all these tools that are out there that, by the way, didn't even exist 5 years for the most part. Well, think about it. Twitter wasn't here 5 years ago. How many of you are currently writing a blog about your profession? Put up your hands, those of you that are actually writing a personal blog about your profession. How many of you are providing creative content? That's great, by the way, but 11%, 10%. Content is incredible if you can be creating content, putting together articles, sharing articles. And ideally, there's sort of two things about marketing. One is in the blogging world. One is the curation, which is finding content and sharing it with your friends and on LinkedIn and things like that, and blogging about it. And the second thing is content creation, which is about creating original content, original thought around existing ideas. And I would encourage you to do both. Same with LinkedIn. You know, LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook and all these sorts of things are incredible branding tools that you have no excuse to tell me that you don't. And guess what? How many of you would suggest to friends and maybe even to yourself that you got to learn how to sell yourself better? Put up your hands, those of you that would say that. That I have to learn how to sell myself better. And you actually recommend that to people. All right, so about 50% of you. How many of you get frustrated when somebody is trying to sell you something? Put up your hands, those of you that it's very frustrating to you. You walk in a scenario and it's very irritating to you to be sold to. Therein lies the problem. I said it, I've written about it. Guess what? I'm wrong in the past. I'm enlightened. It's not about selling, it's about marketing. It's not about selling, it's getting people to buy in. How many of you like to buy? Put up your hands, those of you that like to buy. You like shopping. Yeah, a large percentage really like shopping, right? So this is the concept of not selling yourself, but marketing yourself. Why? Because as you do this consistently and confidently, what this is going to do is create opportunity to come your way. And I have seen that. And guess what? We live in kind of the internet age, and we kind of think if I just start doing this tomorrow, I should start seeing results the next morning. That's not going to happen. This is a long-term investment you have to make to yourself. And I call this the 10-minute rule. You know, you might say, oh, Alan, I am too busy for all this stuff. I'm, you know, whatever. I'm at work. I'm blah, blah, blah. I don't have time. So here's a principle that I'd like you to do. And I will give you $20 if you do this for a month and you don't see some sort of positive outcome to it, is put aside 10 minutes a day, 5 days a week, to market yourself online in a consistent and disciplined format. Whether it's sharing links, sharing ideas, getting followers, all this sorts of 10 minutes a day. And if, by the way, if you do that 10 minutes a day for 5 days a week, that's an hour a week. If you do that 52 weeks a year, that's a full week of branding. You do that for 5 years, and you do good work. So you can't just be out there, you know, blah, 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 right? Because what's interesting about great brands, again, like the Don Cherrys, the Ron McLeans, the people we're talking about, is not only do they know who they are, but they deliver on that consistently, and they evolve and adapt and change. So you can't just be out there marketing yourself. You actually have to be delivering on the promise consistently. If you do both, this is the principle. It's not just good enough to be a smart, well-meaning, nice, hardworking HR professional, and I should be noticed, any more than I can own a coffee store that provides good value and good coffee on Queen Street and not do any marketing. You would say I'm absolutely crazy that you think I'm going to be successful that way. So these 4 principles, knowing who you are clearly, knowing who your market is, marketing yourself, and evolving. Absolutely, the idea of evolution. You know, why is RIM and Eaton's no longer around? Not because they didn't do good work and didn't have well-meaning people. They they'll challenge on an ongoing basis. So let me ask you a question. What's your brand? Tell me in 2 words what your brand is in the question box here. What's your brand? You are. I am. ... What's your brand? See that hesitation? It's interesting. When I asked you, by the way, what the brand was for Starbucks, immediately I had like 10 responses before I had finished the words out of my mouth. What's interesting is I'm noticing here responses are coming in. I've just had the 4th response. Okay? What does this mean? It means that you want to really work on this concept of what it is that makes you special. What is it that makes you distinctive? You know, I love this picture in Ottawa. There's a taxi car, and this is an example of branding. A person that understands their uniqueness and is willing to stand out and be true to that. And you've got to figure that out. The I am, right? What is it that makes you? And again, I don't want to hear blah, blah, blah words, right? That's why I give the example of the fundraising person who said, I'm a data geek. They didn't say I'm a blah, blah, blah. They gave me something that was distinctive and had a voice to it, just like great brands do. So what is it that makes you special? And maybe you're struggling with that. And we have a tool on our website you can download. It's on our website, and it's called the Career Identity Tool. And it's right on our front page. It's a free 15-minute career test. And it's more, I'm not going to spend a lot of time going deeply on that today, but it is there for you to download for free, right? And help you think about this idea and what it means to have a career identity. So what are the 5 components of you as a unique individual? So what you do is take a piece of paper, if you have that, or on your desktop, write these 5 things on the left-hand side. Talents, values, passions, lifestyle, and ecosystem. Talents, values, passions, lifestyle, and ecosystem. What are those 5 things for you? And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to write on the right to that, what are your talents? So what are talents? What's the difference between talents and skills? Talents meet these three criteria. You're good at them, you enjoy them, and you get good feedback. What are your talents? So skills, we need both, by the way. We need both talents and skills. So what are yours? Second thing, what are your values? If you think about your current values, in the sense they are always your values, I believe, right? Or we become more true to them, hopefully, over time. So if you think about the best boss you've ever worked for, what would their values be? And that's who you are. What is it about you that makes you special? Passions. What is it that you get excited about? What are you interested in? So what's interesting is you could be an HR professional working for National Grocers. You could be an HR professional working for the Running Room. You could be an HR professional working for the Red Cross. And one of the things you might find is that the values are the passions that you're interested in. And by the way, research shows for executives that have extraordinary careers that are both talented and passionate, you're 6 times more likely to be successful. One of the things you want to pay attention to is, are you engaged in the subject matter? Because I don't think you can just sort of recruit for somebody or give HR strategy to somebody if you don't have a vested interest in the cause, in what the company is about. I also don't think you'd be a very good recruiter, by the way, either, because you won't be that convincing to the person that you probably want to come. So this concept of, are you invested in the cause? By the way, Greenpeace and the Running Room. Greenpeace was started by a gentleman who was a real estate lawyer out of Vancouver who was really interested in what was going on in the South Pacific, right? So passions, then lifestyle and ecosystem. What do those things look like? And this gives you what I call a 3-dimensional view of who you are and what makes you tick. And you can score this. You can evaluate opportunities against it. We have lots of clients who take this 5 things. When they're looking at opportunity, they actually benchmark it. So they might have 4 or 5 different opportunities, or even one opportunity. It can be a way of benchmarking fit, because just like you're looking for the right fit, so are companies, right? So this can be a great tool. The other thing I heard one of our clients said in Winnipeg, and we have offices from Halifax to Vancouver, so we have 11 offices across the country. One of our clients in Vancouver, in Winnipeg said that he had never had an easier time getting it. The hiring manager had said to him that she had never had an easier time hiring somebody, because there's a really clear perspective of who they were and what made them tick. So that's the identity program, the identity idea, right? So what are some other things you want to be thinking about as it relates to this topic about managing your career? One of the other things, a piece of advice I give you is be careful about being too comfortable. You know, I see this over and over again where people say, I'm really comfortable, really comfortable. You know, Eaton's was really comfortable, and so was RIM, by the way. At some point, that comes back to haunt you if you're not, if you're not growing as such. The concept of another concept to think about is talent plus education plus. So essentially, this picture is of a person that works as for a very senior investment advisor in the United States. And he shared this story. It's actually one of the blogs I read, speaking of blogs. And he shared the story of why he hired this person to be his EA. Because when she shared with him that she was really passionate about racing and that she was part of a racing team on the weekend. Again, what is it that makes you different? What I call, we live in a world where it's no longer enabling you to be good. An A, you need an A+. What is your plus? So we talked about brand, we talked about identity, but also part of your brand is what are the things you're doing that differentiate you in the plus? What is it you're doing to add to this world in an interesting and creative way? What are you volunteering with? What are maybe it's a social cause, maybe it's a political cause, maybe it's a charity cause. So what are the things you're getting involved with? And one of the interesting things about that is you always want to have that on an ongoing basis as part of your journey. Why? Because it gives you, one, you're adding more to the world. Two, you're creating a network of opportunities and people that you can draw from. And it's a differentiator. Really important. What's another important piece of this is to think three-dimensionally. Most of you are probably struggling a little bit with your career journey and your job search journey because you're probably thinking two-dimensionally. You're probably still thinking a little bit on what I call the resume model, right? So the old model was resumes, but the new model is really three-dimensional. It's really leveraging tools like Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and all these tools that are out there. And that really, if you look at research around that, if you start moving to that, there's a 14 times factor in moving from that, thinking about Twitter, thinking about Google, thinking about Facebook, thinking about LinkedIn, thinking about using those as ongoing tools, as ongoing career management branding tools, not just as job search tools. The other principle you want to be thinking about in your interviewing, but also in your working, is giving them what they want, not what you think they want. What do I mean by that? I think this is my niece giving her dog water. Well, guess what? Lily had just spent the whole day at the cottage in the water. Now, Lily's not that interested in what our niece has to offer her. So one of the things we'll be thinking about is pay attention to the needs of those around you. When you're working in an HR, pay attention to what they're interested in and start by addressing their interests. One of the interesting things I learned early on as a recruiter is when I went out to a client, I learned from the VP I worked with before, whenever we went into his office, he would always start the conversation with an entry point that was more personal. We'd never run into a new meeting with a client and talk about the problem. He'd walk in the office and he'd notice a picture on their desk. He'd say, oh, your daughter's in ballet. How long should she be doing that? Or your son plays football, or I see you like to golf, or I see you won an award. And what's interesting is thinking about in an interview or in a scenario where you're building relationships, it's about building community and building real people. People work for people, don't work for companies, and that's an important principle. What's another important principle? It's funny, I was in Shoppers Drug Mart and I was picking up toothpaste, and I walked by the aisle and I see in the pregnancy, I see in the condom aisle, I see in the area pregnancy test. How does this relate to our thing? It was unexpected. I didn't expect to find it, and to me it was so obvious. And to me, it's an example of where could you find opportunity that may not be so obvious to other people. As you think about job hunting, as you think about navigating that in the world of work, what's out there that might be more interesting or might be unique that you have access to? How many of you were a Brownie or a Cub or Scout growing up? Put up your hands, those of you that were a Brownie or Cub growing up. In that, all right. What did you learn when you were a Brownie and a Scout? What was the thing that you learned that sticks with you from that experience? So it's interesting, one of our clients is Scouts Canada, so we work with their team on transition issues and leadership development. Yeah, Laura talks about this day of being prepared, teamwork, orienteering. Yeah, orienteering, knowing where you are, knowing where you want to go. So be prepared. You know, it's interesting. One of my clients was telling me that he met with the global head of government relations for one of the very large oil companies. And every day before he starts his day, the night before he goes into his new day, he looks at his schedule. And what he does is he Googles everyone he's going to meet the next day. And he spends a half an hour researching everyone he's going to meet the next day. So he books half an hour. And so when he goes to meet him, and my client had this issue where he sat down with me and he said, "Oh yeah, Jeremy, tell me a little bit about what you do at SIFT." And he's like, "How do you know about SIFT?" He said, "Because I researched you." So it's the idea of being prepared, the concept of teamwork, the concept of orienteering, which is very beautiful. I love that idea, Stephen, of this concept of where are you and where are you going. The concept I promise to share. That's I promise to share and be a friend. You know, here's the reality. We're talking about all those tools, networks, Twitter, Facebook, blah, blah, blah. Okay, you know, here's the end of the reality. People, ultimately, I would argue today, because people are overwhelmed with the amount of noise. What's your network look like? What are you doing to invest in that network? What is it you have that with real relationships with real people? Because that is where opportunity lies, and that's where you're going to build your greatest strengths. And Stephen talks about this idea of leadership. Again, leadership. Leadership starts with you. And Amrina talks about this idea of discipline. Discipline, yeah. You know, I have a slide for that because I really think this is important. Here's the success formula. Half is Zim and half is vigor. Job hunting is the same thing, by the way. My experience has been those that have a good strategy and are smart about it and work at it diligently every single day. It's the same thing with the personal branding thing. It's the discipline of that. It's the discipline of delivering, the discipline of being out there, the discipline of being connected, right? Very important. Here's another premise I'd like to leave with you as well as you think about your career. How many of you would agree with this statement, you should give 100% to your career? Put up your hands that your work should get 100% commitment from you. Put your hands those that would agree with that statement, that work should get 100%. Okay, a lot of you do, right? So here's the reality. Work should not get 100%. It should get your best when you're there. But you should always have leftovers for other things in your life. I've seen that with a lot of professionals in a variety of things where they give their all to work. They give their all. And then they come home and they have nothing to give to their partner, to volunteer activities, to things they're interested in. And by the way, when you have this, I took this picture on the beaches in Toronto, and this guy blowing bubbles on a Tuesday night. Who knew, right? And there's a person in the background kayaking. And this is really important that you have a space in your life for other things. Because why? Because I call it the fair trade principle. It's like farming. You can't draw out of the ground without putting back in it. And finding places to do. And this is why good fit, where you don't let work consume you. Because you will not be that productive, by the way. You're fooling yourself if you think you can give 110% to work and be successful. It's not sustainable. Another thing that'd be important to do is optimism. Optimism is a very important thing. I see this over and over again with today, especially. You and I are bombarded by negativity, basically. Why? Because guess what? There's not much profit in good news. The world is a very good place. There's lots of amazing things going on in this world. There's lots of interesting and neat opportunities that are out there. It's an incredible amount going on out there, really, that are good and interesting and engaging. And you have to be very careful. That's one of the things I'd be very careful with you when you're job hunting, is that you protect yourself from that. And one of the ways I can give you is an idea around that, which is something I do. I do not start my day by listening to the news. Try it for a week. Try for 1 week not listening to the news starting your day. Don't go online and read it. Don't listen to it as you're waking up in the morning. Don't dial in and say what's going on in the world. Try it for a week, to check the news at lunch. It'd be interesting to see, because when you wake up in the morning, your mind is just getting awake, right? And so when you set it up with the world is a terrible place, blah, 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 right? All these challenges. And we don't have a lot of control over all those things. It's a really good principle that can help you in doing that. The thing I would say is you have to know when's enough and not enough at work. You have to know when when your boundaries at work. Knowing when you've done enough and not enough. The same in your job hunt, when you've done enough and not enough, and being honest with yourself and paying attention to that. Right? So I'm going to show you this file here, this picture here. What do you think is on this piece of property now? Tell me what you think is on this piece of property now. What's on this piece of property now? So some people say a car wash, trees, nothing. A lot of people say nothing. Why do you think that there's nothing on it? Why do you think there's nothing on it? Why is there nothing on that piece of property? How do you think that? Maybe. Maybe. Coming soon, maybe. So let me ask you a question. Are you coming soon, maybe, going to start working on your brand? Are you coming soon, maybe, going to start a blog? Are you coming soon, maybe, going to get involved with the HR Association as a volunteer? Are you coming soon, maybe, going to meet some interesting people or intern somewhere or finish off a master's? Are you coming soon, maybe, going to get out of that bad relationship? Are you coming soon, maybe, going to start to get in shape? And we all have stuff we struggle with, and I'm not saying that to burden you with that, but I want to awaken you with that sign, because what's interesting is there is nothing on that sign. There's actually now a for sale sign on that piece of property, a for sale sign. Tremendous. There is a need, by the way, for what they're offering in this little town. It's actually outside of where I live, outside of Ottawa. There's a need for what they're offering, but they just didn't follow through. They weren't committed. So this is the fundamental thing. If you are going to do anything in life to be successful, the thing that determines those that are successful and those are not is really one thing, is the ability to follow through and be committed. And don't allow yourself to have coming soon maybe conversations. Either have that conversation or don't. Don't allow your friends to have coming soon conversations. Call them on it. We've all had them, by the way. Call them on it. Call them on it. Why this is even more important, I have 2 kids, and so for me, these are my 2 kids, and they're awesome, awesome teenagers. And people talk about teenagers. You know what? I have terrific teenagers. I don't have terrible teenagers. And I had terrific 2-year-olds too, by the way, not terrible 2-year-olds. And why this is even important, but because I think work has a huge part to play in our lives. And by the way, our lives are very integrated, right? There's no such thing now anymore of work-life. It's integrated, right? And to me, you are, as I am, mentoring and influencing important people in our lives. And especially in the world of HR, you have this tremendous opportunity to influence and share and encourage people, all the reasons that you guys were drawn into HR, the whys, right? And to me, this is what's amazing about and you following through on this and you being committed and you doing the right things, is it's not only good for you, but it's amazing for the people you really care about, the people you really deeply care about. And I look at my kids and seeing the way that they're interfacing the world, and part of it is their own choices, but part of it is they're watching how I do it and learning from me and modeling that. And so this is really important. So I'm going to open this up for questions, but before we do that, what is one takeaway from today that you are going to implement? So not your coming soon maybe thing, right? But one fresh takeaway from today. I learned one lesson from a young professional. And a friend of mine went to a seminar. And I asked him, well, how did it go? And he said, well, it wasn't great, but I took away this one idea. Now, hopefully you found today was good, not that you weren't saying it wasn't great. But what I learned from Brian was this concept of what's my one takeaway. And if whatever I did, if I took a takeaway and did something with it, then there was value in it. Otherwise, to be honest with you, you've wasted your time. You've had a nice conversation. You had a coming soon maybe conversation, right? Right? So what is that one takeaway thing? I'm going to share some of those things. So Brand talks about the idea of my brand. Excellent. Okay. Alexander talks about discovering my strengths and finding a unique way to effectively brand myself. Bang on. Don't say I am a blah, blah, blah. Sharon talks about being committed to my job development and determine a branding strategy. Yeah. Rachel talks about branding myself and seeing what sets me apart from others. And what's interesting, one of the things that I think about this concept, by the way, branding, it's not that you're in competition. You know who your main competitor is? Yourself. I've heard that from many, many high-end athletes, entertainers, business people. One of the things I've noticed, one of the comments they'll say, they don't care about competition. They care about themselves in a way, right? They're not focused on. Stephanie talks about this idea of knowing who I am and what I can provide. Hyo talks about the idea of optimism and importance of that. Lisa, marketing my niche brand and committing to making it happen. That's awesome. Stephen, determine who I am. Daldea, this idea of branding myself. Noelle, finding my personal brand. Julie, figuring out who I am. You know, it's interesting. That's a great question in life. I always say there's two great questions in life we have. Well, there's probably three. Who am I, and why am I here? What do I do with that, right? A big question. By the way, it's not an old question. It's to thyself be true. Know thyself, and to thyself be true. Lisa talked about do your brand. Swati talks about this idea of to be more visible on LinkedIn. Yeah. Sabrina, to focus on my passion. Marina talks about the idea to take brand this thing way more seriously and get more active and thorough with discipline. Sarah, branding. Ken talks about especially my brand and especially with social networks, and that's what's neat. Lelia talks about this, using social media to effectively brand myself. Brianne, again, branding. Cassandra talks about the investing time in yourself. There's nothing more greater to do than investing in yourself. Dot, the idea of market, don't sell, and the idea of an ongoing career. Look at your career commitment like I do my fitness. You know, 5 days a week I'm doing something, or 4 days a week usually. So last night it was hot yoga. Today it'll be a run. You know, during the summer it's different things, right? So, excellent. Sarah talks about I'm going to continually try and evolve in my work. So I would say I would continually am going to be involved in my work, right? So I always say you can get everything you want if you really, really try. It's a great book, by the way. Really, really try. Don't. Brianne, let them know what I have to offer rather than the other way around. Absolutely. Stephen talks about that as well. Lisa, investing in my network. Stephanie, finding my niche. Another concept that Dale talks about, know and trust my abilities. That's a very important thing. I think you actually know most of these things. It's the trust part. One is to know, but the big element is to trust it, to trust in yourself. Okay. So how can we help you? Well, there's a few different ways. We have a number of different programs, so if you're looking for help on the organizational side, then we can help you if you want to bring us in to do some one-on-one stuff, whether it's workshops, leadership development, career transition, outplacement services. What makes us unique is it's one-on-one, and it's not just webinar-based. It's actually really high-touch, and we're able to do that because we don't have the big costs of the major firms, the big firms, the big brands that are global brands. We're able to offer more value at one-on-one, and that's our big thing, and to humanize it, the whole journey. Maybe on yourself you're struggling with your job search, and this is actually where we get involved with a number of clients, helping them to think about their job search, to navigate their job search, and to do that. You can do that by connecting with us. You can set up a quick call. You don't have to do a full session with us, but that's another way. I'm going to open this up for questions. I'm going to stay on extra. I know we've gone a little bit over. It's 1:03. For those that need to go, I want to thank you for participating in today, and thank you for, I hope you found this helpful. On our website, careerjoy.com, there's a bunch of stuff there that you can download for free, podcasts and blogs and guides. On our Facebook page, if you could like our Facebook page, that would be great if you like us. And then, as I mentioned earlier, on my LinkedIn account, send me a LinkedIn if you're not connected with me. I'm connected with literally thousands of Canadians across the country, and I might be able to link you to somebody that you're not linked to by being, connected to me. Your network is your net worth. Remember that. Your network is your net worth. So I'm going to open this up for questions. If you have specific questions, happy to answer them. So one of the questions asked is where are we located? So we're actually located right from Halifax to Vancouver. So we have offices in Halifax, Montreal, Kingston, Ottawa, 3 offices in Toronto, Toronto downtown, Toronto Mississauga, Toronto Central, Yonge and Sheppard. We also are in Calgary and Edmonton. We're opening in Kitchener-Waterloo. We're opening this month in Kitchener-Waterloo, and as well as Edmonton and Vancouver. So right across the country. The question is, all your work one-on-one? Yeah, it's all one-on-one. So it's all one-on-one. By the way, this is going to be recorded. It has been recorded, and I'm going to be posting it to for our YouTube channel, CareerClass channel, for you to listen again. And maybe pick up on things. And I know sometimes I speak quickly, so that's kind of, I am a quick guy that way. What kind of organizations do you work with? Well, it's interesting. As I mentioned earlier, we work with a wide spectrum on the organization side as well as individual. So we work with not-for-profits. We have a number of not-for-profits. We work with public sector. We work with private sector, and from small to medium-sized to large enterprises right across the country. So, and some of the services we provide around that are outplacement services, leadership development, retirement transition, career planning work, workshops, webinars. There's a variety sort of spectrum of things that we can provide to your organization. Do we subscribe to a specific coaching model? Good question. So I'll answer that question in a way that the specific coaching model we ascribe to is really one that sees individuals as unique, rather than, you know, there's all kinds of models out there. And so I know that sounds kind of general. What do I mean by that? I mean that it's about this concept of really, in principle, know thyself and helping people to be true to thyself. And that is a very old idea, but a very relevant idea, never been more relevant. So there's all kinds of tools we use, and there's all kinds of different models that are out there. We've taken a bunch of them and kind of combined them together in the way that we feel is very powerful and it's helpful, and then all of our coaches are certified. What are our fees? Yeah, so our fees range depending on what we're doing. We have 3 levels of our services. We have a foundational level for young professionals. We have a professional level for mid-professionals, and we have an executive level of service. So we have kind of 3 levels of services, and they range anywhere from $500 to $2,000 for young professionals, and $2,500 to $7,100 for mid-professionals, and $7,100 and above for executives. So there's a kind of 3 different tracks depending on what you're on. Nice, Veronica, thank you. What sort of programs do you offer for recent grads? So we have a career search and a career identity programs for recent grads that we do a lot of work with. So again, helping you to figure out, okay, how do I navigate around all the changes that are going on and how employers acquire, how they use recruiters, how they go about that. So we're involved in different ways that way. Yep. Great. So if they found this helpful today, I'd do 2 things. One, we're doing this again tonight. So if you know others that are wanting, or you want to double dip and come again tonight, feel free to do that. 2, if you would, I would ask if you found this helpful, if you could share with others our website and our tools that we have on there. That's how a lot of people find out about us. Or if you need help, if your organization is looking for a supplier or looking for a vendor and you're not sure who's out there, then hey, give us a shot. At least give us an opportunity to talk to you guys and figure out if we're a fit for you or not, or who might be the best fit. It may not be us. It may be somebody else. So on the corporate side as well as individuals. So if you know that, if you know your employers are looking for help in certain ways, or individuals that are looking for help, then please refer them on to us. We really appreciate that. That's how people find out about us. And we'll be recording this. This has been recorded, and we'll be posting it to our YouTube channel, our CareerClass channel. And so you can double dip or triple dip. And so thank you, everyone. Hope you have a terrific day. And you know what? Like I said, it's an awesome